Hi, welcome to another episode of my podcast. Excited for today's guest, Quinten Smith. He is a fellow believer and RUK Crucible graduate, and he's also a financial planner as well, and getting started in real estate. So, with that, let's get into it.
Yep.
Quinten, good to have you here.
Hey, appreciate you having me on, Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I'm Quinten Smith. I'm in Springfield, Missouri. Married, got 3 kiddos, so started life a little early. So financial planning, been in financial planning for about 2 years now. Real estate I've been to about 4 years now. So real estate I've been in as a realtor for about 4 years. Just kind of started diving into the investment side. But yeah, other than that, I'm very, very devoted to my faith. That's probably the biggest and the surrounding thing about my life. So.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. We'll get into the real estate side of things, which is what I like to talk about. But yeah, I like to get into a little bit of the faith part of things and RUK as well. So I actually saw a post. I really like this post. Let me pull it up that you put on Facebook recently. It's about taking up. So you quoted the verse. Let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. In Luke 9:23.
Mm-hmm.
So what exactly? What does that mean to you? Picking up the cross daily.
Man, I'm somebody who reads the Bible every morning. When I read that the other morning, something about that verse just really stuck. I think it's so not only biblically is important, morally, I think it's very important that we, pick our cross up every day. The guy goes, "Hey, how can I follow you?" And Jesus goes, "You need to deny yourself, pick up your cross daily, and follow me." And I think what's so important about that for me specifically is we as people need to do that a lot more often than what we do. And when it talks about denying yourself, it talks about, humbling yourself enough to not only just think for yourself, but also allow others to speak into your life. I think we as society have kind of gotten to a point where we listen to other people almost too much sometimes, or maybe only just be in our own world. Denying yourself in the favor of Christ is so important because how can you keep him if you don't deny yourself, right? That just really spoke to me that day specifically because it was a good reminder of stop being so self-absorbed sometimes, right? I feel like we all have those tendencies to be able to be maybe self-absorbed and maybe arrogant in some ways, if that makes sense. Not necessarily in a bad way, but I feel like everybody has their own ways that they can kind of be, again, self-absorbed. So seeing that verse kind of just really was a good subtle reminder of make sure to deny yourself and not to live such a wicked life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think it is easy for me to kind of fall in the trap of listening to others versus like listening to what God wants for me.
100%.
That is very important.
I think all of us have that problem though, just because that's what society teaches us as people is I don't know. You hear the word spiritual thrown around so much in today's day and age, and it bothers me because not everybody's spiritual is, in my opinion, from what I believe and what I've experienced, the true spiritual, right? Everybody talks to says like the third eye or this higher power, and it's just like, man, we don't fight, but we don't fight flesh and blood, right? Like we do have these spiritual battles, and for me, understanding the difference in what other people consider spiritual and what I consider spiritual, I think is just very important. Because you hear a lot of people talk about faith, but what is that faith? Is that faith in yourself? A lot of people have very prosperic faith, right? Like everybody's just like prosperity, prosperity, prosperity. There's a lot of prosperity gospel preached, right? Prosperity, or like a lot of people will breathe, like again, like this third eye. I don't even know what that is. Like, I don't know what that. And if you know, please tell me because I have no idea what it is.
What is it?
Like the third eye. Like, have you ever heard of this?
I literally never heard of that.
It is everywhere. People believe that, like, I don't know, that like you have a third eye that lets you see into like these other. It's nuts. Like, and I just, to me, it's very baffling how people can, I guess, just think that. And again, like that's no, that's I'm not meaning that in a bad way towards anybody. I just don't understand. Maybe it's just because I've experienced God on such a different level than somebody else maybe has. But I also wasn't a believer 5 years ago. So for me, coming from a complete non-believer to where I am and devoted in my faith, I think it's really hard to believe in something else. That's just
Yeah,
my
well, that's incredible. I don't think I even knew that you just you said 5 years ago you weren't a believer. What happened that kind of shifted you into that?
yeah, man. Craig Rochelle, it's a Life Church. You ever listen to Craig Rochelle?
Yeah, I followed him on Instagram. Yeah,
So,
love listening to him.
oh my gosh, he top notch preacher, top notch speaker. His leadership podcast is absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't ever listened to that, his leadership podcast is top notch. Craig Rochelle, man, he changed my faith completely, and I think that he was the only person I felt like could answer some questions that I had that I never felt like anybody else could answer for me. You know, I used to fall victim to the trap of, oh, a human wrote the book, or if God is this loving being, why is there so much hate and bad in the world? That was something I fell victim to a lot, just because of my come up specifically. So it was just really frustrating. And so I never felt like any pastor could really, without saying, read the Bible, read the Bible, read the Bible, read the Bible, never could give me an answer. And I felt like Craig kind of put this different perspective inside of me as a non-believer that kind of actually made me think maybe there's a little bit of hope. And it was a social media post that Life Church posted. And
Really?
so I cannot remember. I need to go back and find it. It had something to do with like what was going on in another part of the world. There was like locusts that were eating the crops, and he started quoting verses for things that were happening in other parts of the country. I'm like, there's no way that this is real. Like, no way. And so it kind of got me like piqued my interest a little bit. And so then I started kind of doing a little bit more research and started just watching sermons online. My wife and I probably watched church online for about a year and a half before actually going in person. And yeah, his perspective was just so much different than anything I've ever experienced before. So it was really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Appreciate you for sharing that testimony. Hey, I gotta go turn off my washer real quick for my dryer.
You're right.
And we're back. But yeah, I love that. And I'm curious, so I'd like to dig a little deeper into that. So you mentioned one of the questions you had was why does God allow all this? Is that right?
Yep.
Like all this pain. And
100%.
so I'm curious, what did you find like for an answer for that? I'm curious.
So, and I love that you're asking that, because I feel like depending on, hopefully somebody will listen to this and kind of get maybe a question answered, kind of like what I needed. And for me, I think the biggest thing was if you seek, you will find. And I know people say that, right? Like people say, oh, if you seek, you'll find. If you knock, the door will be opened. Like he says that in scripture. But I think you have to also want to be open to understanding the concept in order to actually understand the concept. And I think there's the catch. Now, if you're completely like me, I was very closed-minded. I was like, this is fake, this is BS, all this other stuff. So going into it, I already had the answer in my head of what I thought, right? So it's like, of course, I'm not going to be open-minded to understanding what something else would mean. And I think that what really got me there was, let's see. Actually, here, I'll pull it up. I remember a portion of it, but I don't want to quote it wrong. It's James. Skylar talks a lot about James. James, this scripture is something that really changed my perspective about a lot. But Skylar from RUK talks a ton about that. Let's see. Here we go. Okay, so let's go back to the top here. Okay, here we go. So it talks so much about trials and tribulations. It says, consider it great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. Now, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith without doubting. For the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded and unstable in all his ways. Let the brother of humble circumstances boast in his exaltation, but let the rich boast in his humiliation, because he will pass away like a flower of the field. Let me sum that up. Why that was so important. Let's go back to what he just talked about a second ago. Let him ask in faith without doubting, for the doubter is like the surging of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded and unstable in his ways. I think the biggest thing for me, and that what really kind of helped me, was God doesn't want us to go through all these horrible things. He doesn't want us to experience all these trials and tribulations, right? But at the same time, you also have to understand that God does not bring sin on. Okay. Sin is something that the enemy brings and takes from you. So if you're tempted from lust or pornography or whatever that is, right? Like the Lord is not giving that to you and saying, here's pornography, I'm going to test you. That's not what he does. But who does that? It's the enemy. So where those temptations come from, like where temptation is, the Lord is not. Like you have to understand that temptation comes from the enemy. And basically how much trials and tribulations you go through, it all creates a testimony in the end. Okay. How many people I've been able to talk to about my previous situation, about my childhood, or maybe some of the trauma that I went through, things like that. The amount of people I've been able to use my testimony to talk to about has been very cool, because you will not understand until you start doing this how many people have a testimony that is just so touching, but will never ever be able to talk outwardly about that until they feel comfortable enough to do that, right? But your testimony is something that helps others also be able to heal. And I think that that's the power in that, is when I started to realize that it's not he doesn't want me to just sit here and hurt and be all this pain and all this frustration all the time, because that's what I felt. But the good that comes out of that is absolutely insane. And let's also quote another scripture. You will suffer for my name's sake. He says that in scripture too. And most people be like, well, why in the world would I want to be a Christian if I have to sit here and suffer, right? Well, guess what? You're going to suffer one way or the other. You're going to suffer in a good way, or you're going to suffer in a bad way. Now, when I say suffering in a good way, that could be financially, that could be health-wise, that could be so many different things, right? And you sit there and think about it. When he says suffer for my name's sake, he wants you to want him. It's not about him wanting you to be forced to love him. He wants you to want him. He's already given you the grace and the goodness, right? And so I think that for those who have that question of, if there is so much bad in this world, how can there be something that is good that actually believes that everybody, like he created everybody and that he loves everybody, if there's so much evil? God is not evil, okay? God is the good. But the enemy is what also brings evil and separates you from the Lord. So I also, for anybody that has that question, understand that not only are you creating a testimony, because you're also supposed to bear other people's burdens. That's another verse, right? Bear other people's burdens, help other people go through their things, right? Not only are you creating a testimony, but you're creating some type of faith inside of that, saying like, God, I believe that you're going to pull me out of this situation. Like, if let's say that's financially, like, let's say if you're going through a point where you're like, man, I can't even afford groceries, right? Like, that's where you have to have that undoubtedly faith of, God, I believe you're going to pull me through this. And even when it feels like he's not there, he's also seeing how much you're going to dive into him. He wants you to want him, right? And so that's the thing. Don't look at this world and think that that's what the Lord wants. He doesn't want that. I mean, think about all of the Old Testament. It's like how much bad there was. Why do you think he wiped everybody out originally, right? It's like he doesn't want all the bad in the world, but there's also the opposition that wants the opposite effects of that, right? But he wants you to want him more than what your temptation wants. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, man, amen. That was good. I actually recently heard someone explain it this way, that God, in the beginning, there was darkness, right? God created light. So light is like, it's similar to good and evil, right? God didn't create evil, but evil is the absence of God in our heart. So that's,
100%.
that was very good. Thank you. Let's talk about Rise Up Kings. I'm curious. So we were both part of the Crucible in September. How did you come across that? And what attracted you to the Rise Up Kings?
So I actually, Skylar got me with one of his ads about 2-Day CEO book. Okay. So I actually had no idea that Rise Up Kings was even a thing at all. So I actually bought the 2-Day CEO book. By the way, if anybody hasn't read that book, it is absolutely phenomenal. The 2-Day CEO is great. So with that, I started, I was scrolling Facebook one day and realized that in the book, if I'm not mistaken, he was talking about building stuff. And I realized that there was something that Skylar had said. I think it was in the book, or maybe I saw it on Facebook. But it said something about like Rise of Kings, and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" And so then I kind of looked into it, and I realized, I'm like, "Oh, like a whole brotherhood involved with this guy." And I'm like, "It's kind of weird. I'm not gonna lie." So I'm like, "I'm gonna look into it," and I realized. And then obviously once I clicked on it or said stuff out loud, of course, Facebook's algorithm and ads started then coming and attacking me. So then things kept popping up, and I was like, it was so weird because I saw it probably 6 to 8 months before I went, and I actually was like, man, this would be cool, but not something I'm probably going to be interested in. And it was so weird, and the more it kept coming up, I felt so heavy, and it was actually the refinery that I was going to do. I didn't know about the Crucible. I was only the refinery that I was actually going to do. And so for you guys that don't know, refinery is just for business owners. Crucible, Kyle and I went to. That's for, was it 18 to 27?
Yeah,
Right?
something like that.
So, but anyways, so as I kept coming past it though, and I just felt like God put this really just deep rooted feeling around this, and it was just like there's something here, but I don't know what it is. And like I would talk to my wife and say, I think I want to do this, and she's like, I mean, that sounds great, but if nobody's seen the refinery prices, she's like, I don't know about that. And she's like, maybe in a couple years. And I'm like, yeah, maybe you're right. And then she kept asking me like, what do you feel like you're going to get here? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, there's just something here. And I was like, I don't know. And I said, I feel like there's something that like, there's some piece of myself that I'm either finding there or something that I'm going to learn and be able to bring back. And yeah, I ended up finding the Crucible, and I was like, man, the price difference. So I was like, okay. So, and then she was like, okay, well, that makes a little bit more sense. And so I'm like, okay, that's fair. And so then we kind of talked about it. We felt like it made sense. And then I bought the ticket, and I was like, I still really didn't know what I was going for, right? Like going into that, I mean, I don't know about you, but going into that, I was like, man, I don't know what I'm going here for, but I feel like I was called to go, and I'm very, very thankful that I went.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds similar to me. Well, I heard about it I think it was this summer. My friend, who also was part of the Crucible, told me about it, and I think I signed up like 2 days later. But yeah, I also kind of similar. I didn't really know why I was going. I just felt like I needed to. There was this feeling that I should go, and I'm glad I did for sure. I think especially like the way I guess society is now, like the more if we could get like a lot of young men to go there, I think it would actually change the outlook in the future of this country for sure.
Man, well, it's something I always say too is like society teaches us, and for any of you guys, rather, I don't care if you're 50, I don't care if you're 18, any of you guys that are listening, society teaches us to not be vulnerable, because guess what? If we're vulnerable with people walk all over us, people step on us, you're weak, nobody, like, you're not going to go anywhere in life. That is literally the complete opposite. And the more that I felt that the Lord continued to tell me to like get more vulnerable with people, aka sharing my testimony. I mean, it's really hard for me to share like just my testimony, my trauma. There's a lot of stuff in there. And so it was really hard for me to ever even want to talk about that. But the amount of people that would get vulnerable back with me, that would be like, man, I've never had anybody that I could ever feel like I could talk to about this. That is brotherhood. That right there, I always say, vulnerability, like we connect in our weaknesses. What do we do in our strengths? We all butt heads. Like we're just like, oh, I'm better than you. Oh, you're arrogant. Oh, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. But versus like vulnerability, like we connect in our weaknesses. Like, man, you struggle with this. Like, man, I struggle with this too. Like, how do you think we could help build each other up? But society completely coaches the opposite of that. And it's so frustrating. So for any of you guys out there, like just know the more vulnerable that you can get with people, I promise you, the stronger of a man that really makes you.
Yeah, absolutely. That was probably one of, if not the biggest takeaways from Rise of Kings, like the coaches there. I think the confidence they have, it comes from like having nothing to hide, and that's a huge takeaway I took from that event was that having like being vulnerable and having like nothing to hide is such a freeing feeling, right? And I think that's huge.
I think that honestly, one of my favorite lines leaving there, and it was always Coach BJ, don't get shamed, get curious. Every time he would say that, it would hit me just in the chest of like, man, don't get shamed, get curious. And for those of you who don't understand what I'm meaning by that is when we would talk and get vulnerable with each other, they would ask us a lot about like, why are you here? And some people would say, oh, I struggle with pornography. Or some people would say, I want to be a better man for my spouse. I want to be a better husband for my kid, or a better father for my kids. I wanted all this stuff. But then he would say, well, where else does this show up in your life? Like, let's say, for an example, if you struggled with something you said, where else does this show up in your life? And it really make you think. I don't know about you, man, but it would hit me in the chest when he'd be like, where else does this show up in your life? And I'm like, oh, don't go there. Like, I don't want to go there. Right. But then he was like, don't get shamed, get curious. And I'm like, I like that. And I say that all the time now because it's like, don't get shamed. Like, shame is literally exactly what the enemy wants. Like, that's how he controls and manipulates, steals, kills, and destroys. Like, that's scripture. Like, that's exactly how he does that stuff. Versus when you get curious, like, why do I do this? Where does this stem from? How can I fix this? Right? You're not sitting there at a ball just shut down. So no, I wanted to bring that up because, man, that was one of the lines that I continuously repeat.
Yeah, the enemy, that is like how he attacks us, right? Like after maybe doing something or thinking something that we know we shouldn't, then that's like the first thing we go, like as humans, I think the first thing we go to is shame, because that's the enemy, trying to wedge himself in there. So yeah, that is, man, I'm loving this conversation. But yeah, I'm curious, what has changed the most in your life since graduating from the Crucible?
I think for me, if I had to take a pretty big look back of like the man I was and the man I am today, honestly, I think being present in the moment. Oh my gosh, I can't even explain in words, man, how much I struggled with that. I have crippling anxiety, crippling depression. Like, I struggle with that stuff terribly. And so for me, being present is so hard for me because the anxiety is like, what's going to happen, right? Or focusing on what already happened. And then I get there and then I just get in this pit and this ball and then I just shut down. Like, that is typical for my head. Here's the problem with that. You're never thinking straight. Never think straight. And I know anybody that watches that will probably think the exact same thing if you struggle with that. Being present was something I probably learned the most about. Was, man, you remember chaos?
Yeah.
Chaos.
Yeah, right.
Gosh, and I'm not going to talk too much about this because I don't want to give it away for anybody. Like what happens and stuff. But man, chaos. Holy smokes, that was a lesson learned for me. Because for me, I could not control what was going on in that situation. I couldn't grab the wheel. I couldn't stop on the brakes. I couldn't do anything. Right? I literally had no control over anything what was going on. But I did have control over one thing, and that was me. And that was something that was huge for me because that was somewhere I struggled so much of like, look, I could choose to freak out in this moment. I could choose to shut down, or I can choose to just say, you know what? And I remember, I don't know about you, but I prayed during that ride because I'm like, if we flip, if we flip, then Lord, I guess this is what it was supposed to be, man. Like, man, I remember praying so much in that, but I did. I prayed for courage of just like, Lord, help me be present. Like, just help me. Like, I can only control me in this situation. So being present, man, I struggled with that. I'm sure a lot of business owners that may watch this too may struggle being present at home. Um, I focused on that a lot last year, but that helped me a lot. Even just to deepen that of like when I'm home, being present when I'm at home, not focusing so much on like, what do I got to do tomorrow when I get in the office? Or oh, what did I not finish today? Did I have to get on my computer or whatever when I get home? Like being present with my kids, being present with my wife, like cherishing the moments that you have, or even if the moment's hell, right? Like even if you are going through what you feel like is hell, right? Like being present, saying like, this is what it is. Like, stop trying to jump forward and stop trying to go backwards and regret of what you didn't do to get out of this situation and all this stuff. Like, focus on you now and focus on being present, because guess what? What else can you do? Like, what else can you do? Cast all your anxieties on me, right? Like, that's what he tells us in scripture. So being present is probably the biggest thing that I think that has helped me.
Awesome. Yeah, that is good. Present, like being able to just to be in the present, not like for me, I think I don't necessarily like the past. I don't really think about it that much, but like anxiety for the future is something that I used to deal with a lot, like thinking of future constantly. And I think it's good to be in the present and just enjoy it and take it as it comes. So yeah, I'd like to go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, but to ping off of that, I would say that a small amount of anxiety is good for business, though, right? Like, you want to be anxious because if you know you're kind of uncomfortable, right? You know you're kind of stepping out of your comfort zone. So I think that is important. I think a portion of anxiety is okay, and I think that for us that are just wired for adrenaline and wired to just go and drive, right? We need that, because without any type of push of like, what if, that's not going to push us, right? So I think a small portion of anxiety is okay, but it's when it gets crippling to the point where it's controlling you in every aspect of life. I think that's where it becomes an issue.
Yeah, I've heard some people talk about having a small amount of paranoia is good. There's a book, I don't know the author, but I think it's called "Only the Paranoid Survive." So that is interesting thought. But I'd like to talk about what you do. You're a financial planner. I think your company name is Smith Wealth Management. Is that right?
Yep, okay. Smith Wealth Management.
Yeah, just talk about what you do and how you can help people there.
Yeah. So essentially, like, I love the question of like, what do you do? I feel like that's like the $1 million question for everybody. Like, what do you do? Just when somebody asks. So for me, what I like to respond to that is I like to help business owners minimize taxes and pursue better financial opportunities. That's my line. Now, why do I not just say like financial planner? I work way different, like almost contrary to what a regular financial planner does. I don't sit you down in my office and try to sell you products. Like, that's just not what I do. Like, if anybody has ever sat through one of those meetings, it sucks. That's just how it goes. For me, I love working with tax strategies. I love working with estate planning. I love working doing stuff like that. So I'll give you kind of an example real quick. So let's use a gentleman that I talked to. He's a business owner. He's got 2 kids that go to private school. So basically, what I did was I said, hey, he's asking me, how can I save money on income tax? And I'm like, where are you paying your kids? He's like, well, what do you mean paying my kids? Like, I buy them clothes, I buy them blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, are you paying your kids through your business? He's like, I didn't know you could do that. I'm like, you can actually pay your kids up to $14,000 a year per child. It's fully tax deductible to the business, and they don't pick up income tax. And so he's like, that's interesting. And I said, well, guess what? Since you send them to private school, let's even get more strategic. If you take that $14K, let's funnel $8,000 into a 529 account. I'm not a fan of college accounts by any means, but since they go to private school, guess what? Funnel that into a private school account, 529. You can pay tuition out of a 529. What does that then create? An additional 6% tax deduction on top of that. So my point with that is, I then gave this gentleman, I saved him thousands of dollars. I mean, almost 5 figures in tax savings when in a 3-minute conversation, right? Like that is what I love doing. That is essentially what I like to help, is figuring out how to help people be more strategic, how to save more money on income tax, and things of that nature too. Obviously, I coach people how to invest in real estate. I highly encourage investing in real estate, which most financial planners don't, because why? I don't get paid for it. So I highly encourage you doing this. So that's kind of a little bit about what I do.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Kind of the first thing you said is you help business owners with tax strategies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very important. Like I learned something right there, because I'm in the real estate space, but not necessarily, I don't know all the concepts to like all the tax advantages and strategies. So I will have to come back to this episode, down the road. Maybe once I have kids, but
Sure.
I love that. Talk about so you do financial, like you said, financial planning, and a lot of financial planners don't talk about real estate and the benefits of investing in real estate. What do you like about real estate?
What do I not like about real estate? A lot of people, I get this question a lot. Well, you're in both sides. Because like I said, I'm a realtor, so I'm licensed in real estate, but that's more or less kind of a side. If somebody approaches me and wants me to do something, I will. I don't really market myself for that anymore. I'm busy on the financial side. So the biggest thing for me is what I love about real estate. Everybody always asks me, you're in both fields. What do you like better? Okay, I like the market, but I love real estate. Meaning that, like, don't skip out. Like, and I think this is where a lot of real estate investors go wrong. Do not skip out on the returns off the market. Okay, there is some really good returns in the market, and there's some really good strategies that you can use in the market. Well, guess what? Don't miss out on the other opportunities, though, which is most financial planners will not coach you on how to invest in real estate or why to invest in real estate. Why would I not want my client to get 100+% return just because I don't get paid, right? Like that's just not that to me. You're not working in your client's best interest, and I think that that's where I get so flustered. Is a lot of people only, well, in my field, a lot of planners will only coach to do in the market investing when they may do other stuff outside for themselves. Why would I not want my client to go make an additional 80 to 90% return, for an example, outside of the market for themselves? Because guess what? Not only does that build trust, but I'm also working and doing exactly what the client wants. Ultimately, they're always going to come back around to me, right? Just because of how much I helped. Cost segregation. I mean, you're in real estate. You know much about cost seg?
Yeah, the cost seg is. I've never done it myself, but yeah, it is definitely a powerful tool to get that depreciation.
But you would be surprised how many people have no idea what cost segregation is. How many people have no idea what that is? Do you know, like, it's crazy. I can save there's some people that walk in, you can save 6 figures in taxes just within a 90-second conversation about cost seg. And they're like, what? And I'm like, nobody's not talking to you. Like, your CPA is not talking to you about this. Your planner's not talking. Why? Like, and that's like, whoa, the whole dynamic of that conversation just flips, because it's like, man, so tax benefits of that, holy smokes. Real estate's got a ton of tax benefits too. Again, the returns, you can make some astronomical returns in real estate. Now, you can also invest in the market in certain ways, private equity funds and venture capital funds, things like that. And you can make better returns and really, really good abnormal returns. But for me, I love real estate, and I will always coach my clients to do real estate for that reason too. So
Awesome, I love that. And just to clarify, when you say inside of the market versus outside of the market, what exactly are you talking about?
So you can do, so there's an exchange. So there's stock exchanges. So like the New York Stock Exchange, for example, right? There's stuff that trades on the exchange, and there's stuff that doesn't trade on the exchange, like private equity funds. Okay, so that means, like, think about like Google or Facebook. Okay, they were basically venture capital funds. So they basically got a bunch of private investors that said, hey, we believe in this company. Let's all invest in this privately and boost this company. Imagine how much stake they have, right? Like, imagine how much of a return that those guys got. You can get some astronomical returns in like venture capital funds and things of that nature too. But here's the catch. It's risk versus reward, right? The higher the
Yeah,
risk,
definitely.
way higher the reward. But you got to put that into consideration because guess what? You could invest 100 grand into something that you think is going to be great and lose it all. So on like in the market versus outside of the market is just more or less like there's stuff that trades on secondary markets. You get exchanges. I could that's a whole other conversation, but more or less there's stuff that changes on exchanges. There's stuff that trades off the exchanges, all kinds of different stuff. But to make some really, really good astronomical returns, off of the stock market is definitely a place to make some really abnormal returns too.
Yeah, got it. Thanks for clarifying that. And I'm curious as well on cost segregation. So I know about it, but I guess I don't know like where it all applies. Like what kind of properties can you
So
get cost segregation on?
there's really there's two portions of cost seg. It's short term and long term. For me, a lot of people ask me this. Like I talk a lot about taxes, and people ask like, "Are you a CPA?" No, I'm not a CPA. I'm not a licensed CPA, nor will I ever be a CPA. Do I know enough to be dangerous? Absolutely. But that's what I want. I know enough to be dangerous with things, but basically to kind of ping that off to one of my partners that I'm like, hey, I know that this guy knows what he's doing. We need to go put you in contact with X, Y, and Z. So, but basically, without going into a extremely long conversation of the difference between long-term and short-term cost tags, basically those are going to be your two differences is short-term rentals, for an example, so Airbnb versus long-term. They're cutting down and cracking down a lot on Airbnb stuff. So you used to be able to be, man, I'm gonna get into a big conversation about this. They used to, I don't know why I'm blanking. You used to be able to, gosh, why am I blanking on this? Anyways, the short-term aspect, there is a huge. I have all the details at the office, but there used to be a huge difference between a short-term aspect and a long-term aspect. Like there's portions of Airbnb that they're really cracking down on to where it's really going to kind of change the whole dynamic of cost seg and being able to do it or not to be able to do it. Again, it's just a huge conversation, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Well, I think we're getting close to the end here. Time flew, but it was fun.
Yep.
like to always kind of ask a couple questions towards the end. First of all, well, I love reading, so it's kind of a selfish question, but what are there like 2 or 3 books that you could recommend people would read, just entrepreneurs in general, or I guess
Oh, yeah.
any kind of business self-development books?
Oh yeah. So if you've never read The Power of One More by Ed Milet, oh, I love that book. The Power of One More, and I'll kind of sum it up. It's really in a gist, always regarding back to one more. I'll give you an example. I don't know if it's from because I think I have 2 or 3 chapters left. But I heard somebody say this a long time ago, and it was basically referring to the book. And this gentleman, he was basically trying to get sober, and he basically would say, "I just want to be sober for one more day." So instead of focusing so much on being sober for life, like that just sounds so hard, right? Like one more day, just one more day. It's like you can do that. You can do that one more day, right? Like, and it's every single day is one more day. It's not, oh, I've been sober for 5.5 years. It's one more day. I just need to be sober. And that's a lot of what the gist of the book is the one more mindset. And for me, I've developed a lot of that, like one more. And so it helped tremendously when I was doing 75-day hard of like, man, like cake. Oh my gosh, I love cake. Okay. I love cake. Like cake is something that I fall victim to. Okay. We were at like 2 different like get togethers right before the holidays. And I was on freaking 75-day hard. And of course, everybody's bringing cake and all this other stuff. And I'm like dying. And it was just that same mindset though. If every time I pass by, it's just like one more day of no cake or no sweets or like whatever it is, right? It's like one more day. So it's helped me a ton. And I've kind of like my wife has kind of started to develop a little bit of it too. But man, it's a really powerful mindset if you can kind of adapt that. But The Power of One More by Ed Milet. Atomic Habits is always a great one. That one's just top notch. like I said earlier, the 2-Day CEO, if you're somebody who has a company that has employees or anything like that, that book is awesome. Like, I mean, phenomenal. The 2-Day CEO, Skylar Lewis really goes into depth. Have you read the 2-Day CEO?
I'm kind of in the middle of reading it, so I
Okay.
haven't read the full thing.
So it's awesome. But the 2-Day CEO, The Power of One More, Atomic Habits, like I said, which is a typical one for most people. And if you want a spiritual book, man, Dangerous Prayers by Craig Groeschel. Oh my gosh, that's actually what really got me to deepen my faith. That book I read 4 times last year. That's how
Well,
much I loved it. Yeah, it was. It was nuts, that book. But I will say though, be careful. Like the title says Dangerous Prayers, and you would think it's like, oh, it's just a funny title. Like be careful, because when you pray a certain way and you pray these dangerous prayers like David used to pray, like seek me, search me, know my heart, point me in the way of everlasting, like the Lord will start working in you in some really scary ways. Like when you're asking him to seek you and to know your heart, and he will start bringing things out in you that you didn't want to touch, like you did not want to bring out. And is it powerful? Absolutely. Is it hell at the same time? Absolutely. And that's one reason why I love that book so much. So I would say if those are the books, those would definitely be it for me.
nice. I just got chills. I definitely gotta buy that one.
Dangerous Prayers, man. It's a must read.
Definitely. Well, I will definitely check it out. And actually, the Atomic Habits, I think I've read that one. It's been a while. And Power of One More, I have not read that one, but I definitely I follow it. I like him, so I will
Yeah.
definitely read that book as well. So thank you for those recommendations. And the final question: if you, this is a question I like to ask people a lot, and you, I guess, we're still young, but I mean, if there is anything that you would change, like if you had to start your career over, what would it be?
So what would be one thing that I would change?
Yeah, I mean, if there is anything, if not, then that's fine. I'm curious, always curious to ask people, if they could do something differently, what would it be?
You know, I think if I could change one thing, and this is honestly like going back, let's just say if I was like 18 and basically just knew everything I knew and could just restart. If I was 18 and there was one thing that I could have done differently, I feel was honestly believing in myself a lot more. Um, the power of our thoughts. Again, Bible talks about that so much. But believing in myself more, like I have faith in myself. Don't get me wrong. Like I knew that I was going to go places. Like I constantly kind of fed myself. But there's a difference between telling myself and actually believing in myself, right? Like there's a huge difference. The confidence that you can have within Christ's identity in you and all these other things, like is so powerful. So honestly, that's the one thing, because I felt like my limiting beliefs, aka what I like to call head trash, my head trash held me back so much, because I didn't believe in myself. Or I didn't think I could do X, Y, and Z, or I was too young. I wasn't gonna be taken serious, or like, man, I could go on and on and on. Head trash is something that will literally limit yourself. One of my favorite quotes. Um, let's see, hold on, sorry, I'm blanking. It's literally amazing. It's your gosh, I don't know why I'm blanking on it. It was something, I posted this a long time ago. It was something along the lines of limiting beliefs will create more failures than something. Gosh, I'm gonna have to go back with you. Sorry, I really wish that I could say that because it was so powerful. Anyways, it's one of my favorites. But that would probably be what I would change, is honestly just having more, like focusing more on trying to regain confidence, because it's a
Okay,
must.
awesome. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. Where can people find you and reach out to you?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I'm on Facebook, Quinten Smith. I'm on Facebook. Also, too, I mean, I do a lot of my stuff. I mean, I have a business page on Facebook. I do a lot more stuff on my like creator/professional page, which is just my name. That you can also go to my Instagram. Honestly, I'm probably more honestly Facebook than anything. I really am not too active on Instagram or Twitter or anything like that too. So Facebook's probably the easiest way, and then obviously all my contact information's on there too. So
Awesome. Well, I will put some links in the description. Appreciate you joining me today, Quinten. I really enjoyed the conversation.
yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on, Kyle, and I'm excited to just continue to see your success too, especially after RUK. So
Awesome. Well, take care. We'll see you on the next one.
awesome. See you, buddy.